welcome to the first and beta episode of Football America. And this is Greg James from the 55-Yard Line podcast and also Gridiron Japan podcast. And I'm sitting here today. I am in Japan, and I'm sitting here today with Aaron Harris of the Football Odyssey podcast. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing good, man. Congratulations on the new show, and thank you for choosing me as your inaugural guest.
You were my first choice. That's, when it comes to talking about, it's one thing to talk about the games themselves and the X's and O's, but there's so much more to football, and really much more to football and more to sports than just what happens on the field. And that's what I kind of wanted this show to be about, to talk about kind of the outside forces that affect the games that we watch, that we love, whether it be basketball, baseball, obviously football, soccer, and even hockey. So, but when it comes to, this show, it's about football, but we'll incorporate other elements of other sports in there as we go along in the conversation, obviously. And so we are, this is the first episode, and we're going to sit down. The Super Bowl just ended yesterday. And it was a great game, but there was so much to it beforehand. So, I'm sitting there as I'm watching the pregame hype, and then the inner 12-year-old in me goes, man, it was so much different back in the 70s. So, let's talk about the Super Bowl. Let's talk about yesterday. What are your thoughts? Obviously it was a good game, but did you watch all the Super Bowl hype before all that?
I did not watch a single minute. And I'm actually proud to say it at this point, because it's become a little, it's just overkill. And frankly, I was actually down in South Florida and I was driving back up. So I was getting the car for about 2.5 to 3 hours commuting. So I wouldn't have had a chance to watch it anyway. But by the time I got back to my apartment, no, I didn't feel the need to watch any pregame. I turned it on at 6:30, and then 10 minutes later they kicked off. I used to really enjoy the pregame aspect of it, but now it just seems that there's far too much coverage leading up to it, and there's only so many topics that you can dive into, so many feature stories you can tell. And frankly, even throughout the week, I didn't really listen to too many podcasts or radio shows previewing the game, because after the first week, what more can you really say? You just basically get a lot of people that are getting on there to, promote their sponsors.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I, being over here in Japan, I'm kind of insulated from at least the live stuff. I don't have cable anymore. I don't have satellite. I can pick and choose what I want. So when it comes to how much I get over here, I can be very selective. So for me, my day usually starts off, turning on Dan Patrick, the podcast, and then Rich Eisen, and then I'm done. And so I only really it's basically, I have a little bit of an echo chamber, I guess. But yeah, it goes to what you said. Everybody, at least on those shows, was just every player. What's his name from quarterback for Jacksonville?
Trevor Lawrence.
He was on there promoting a product. So everybody was promoting something. But what I was missing was, what I was hoping for was, say somebody from NFL Films, somebody to talk more about the history. Greg Cosell would have been a perfect guest for the week at the Super Bowl. And he's been on before, but to talk not only about NFL Films, but also his uncle too. Anytime Greg Cosell goes on a show, I'm like, oh, there's going to be Howard Cosell talk at some point.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I'm right there with you. I watched about 2 hours of it, because in Japan, Super Bowl came on at 8:30 in the morning Monday. So I made sure I got up at 6:30 in the morning, turned on, that was about the time with the NFL International Game Pass. That's when the coverage starts. So I watched that, and believe me, you missed absolutely nothing. There wasn't even a retrospective of about, there was a Pat Tillman thing that they always cram in
right
when there's a Super Bowl down in Arizona. And also too, the veteran in me, I still get very pissed off with the NFL and their salute to service crap, because I know it's, I think a lot of people there are genuine with their feelings and want to honor, but it's become so commercial that it's lost on me. At least I missed the USAA commercials with Gronk. I didn't see any of those this year.
Yeah, the commercials this year, in my opinion, were really not anything noteworthy. The only one that I really enjoyed was the Bush Light commercial where they were mimicking those abused animal shelters commercials, and you had like the werewolf, the bear. I don't know if you had the chance to
Yeah,
see that
yeah.
one. That to me was a humorous one, but aside from that, there was nothing that I noticed that was really stuck out to me.
What stuck out to me was I didn't I didn't pay attention. I guess maybe did I? Yeah, I mean, it just like you said, it was so unmemorable. I'm like, okay, I don't really remember. The ones that really got me that I watched and I walked away going, really, what the hell is going on? Were the Caddyshack ones? They
Mhm.
tried to parrot. They tried to. There was a parody of Caddyshack, and that just fell absolutely flat.
It did feel like a lot of these commercials were like targeting, people who were teenagers 20 or 30 years ago.
Yeah,
It's like you had a new Indiana Jones movie coming out that they were promoting.
right.
Fast and Furious 10 or whatever they're
Yeah.
on. That was a big draw. They had another one with I don't remember the context of the commercial, but it was P. Diddy producing in the studio and a bunch of
Oh,
90s
that
artists
sucked.
coming on and doing a parody of the song that they became famous for. It was like it
Yeah,
felt like nostalgia was a big theme of this slate of commercials, but it just didn't really land anywhere for me personally.
yeah, it sucked. I mean, those really fell flat.
Mhm.
And then there was one too. It was about, well, the one, going talking about movie trailers.
Mhm.
You saw the one for The Flash. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to see that when that comes out because, I don't know how big of a comic book fan you are or comic book movies, but I'm a huge DC guy, and obviously they're about ready to reset that whole universe anyway. And I'm like, oh, maybe this might be the way to reset everything and get that whole franchise on track because it looked like a really good trailer. And did you see it? I don't want to spoil it for you.
After I'm not going to see the movie, but yeah, this shows you how little I know about comic books. I used to enjoy the movies at one point, but I think after about like 2014 or 15, I just stopped watching them. I looked to my buddy to my right who enjoys those movies more or less, and
Yeah.
I ask him, like, what is being fast? What is being super fast as a superpower really gonna do for you as a superhero? I mean, he told me that he can run, so fast that he rips through the time portal. He can time travel. I'm like, that's all well and good, but really, what's his major power? It's like Superman has super strength. The Green Lantern, manifest energy. I didn't really see what the Flash's superpower was aside from being really fast, but he explained to me that he can move so fast that he can create a tornado if he runs in a circle or if he runs at you really fast. He's like a ton of bricks. So I guess that made sense to me after that, but I was kind of like, it feels like a superpower you'd want to have if you want to run away from conflict.
Right, right. So,
Yeah.
well, the trailer for that movie, the Flash trailer, Michael Keaton's in the movie,
Okay.
and he's playing Batman now. What, almost 45 year? I mean, no, 35. I don't know. A long way from when he
Mhm.
played in '89. But there in the trailer, you got the Flash going, "You're," and Michael Keaton repeats the line from the first movie, "I'm Batman." I'm like, ooh, this might actually be good. So we'll see. DC, which is kind of going to roll into my next subject here, as we're talking about football.
Mhm.
But DC, as we know, has kind of fallen flat with.
Well, actually, but before we get to that, can I just talk about the game real
Yeah,
quick?
no, no, no. I was
Yeah.
just going to say they've fallen flat with Black Adam, but we'll talk about that in a bit. But let's talk about the game and
Yeah, I just realized I
um,
never gave you my thoughts on the game. So I did think it was an entertaining game.
Oh yeah,
Obviously there
it
was
was a good game.
it to me was very reminiscent of the Patriots Eagles Super Bowl from 2017.
Yeah,
One of those situations where the offense just moved the ball at will, and it did feel like there was basically 2 plays, 3 plays that came down to deciding the difference. Obviously, Jalen Hurts' fumble, giving a tie to the
Right.
Chiefs, and then um what was I can't remember his name, the punt return that set up the last
Y-
Chiefs touchdown.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. The
then
Chiefs.
and yeah, and then obviously that penalty that essentially iced the game in Kansas City's favor. But
Right.
I did think it was an entertaining game. I'm not going to go so far as to say that it was, one of the best Super Bowls I've ever seen or that it was epic. I think the fact that we didn't have that dramatic ending with, Jalen Hurts trying to drive the team down the field in the last 90 seconds to at least tie it, but possibly even win it, kind of ruined
Yeah.
it. And not only that, but like I'm someone who typically I would much prefer to see a 28-24 game, and then something where both teams are, getting up in the 30s, because I do enjoy when defenses are able to make some, a few big plays throughout the game. And I think it adds a little bit to the drama when you don't really suspect or know for certain that the teams are going to be able to move the ball up and down the field at will. It's like
Right.
I think the possessions kind of are a little more valuable when you're going up against a defense that can, turn the ball over, or at least, force a few 3-and-outs in a row or a few punts in a
Yeah.
row. And I kind of feel like that drama was a little absent just because
It
of that
was.
fact.
Yeah, it was. I mean, there were some obviously there were some great defensive plays and
Mhm.
turnovers that led to scores that, obviously could have it was very much an even game between both teams. Either team
100%.
could have won, but it boiled down to who had the ball at the end.
Mhm.
And, when you put the ball in Mahomes' hands towards the end of the game, it's kind of like that, that way back when, and you're too young to remember this, but anytime Joe Montana had the ball last, like, oh, yeah, we left too much time on the clock. And of course,
Right.
Montana, as Montana always did, even back when he played for Notre Dame. That just shows you how old I am. Um,
I've seen that Cotton Bowl game actually against
yeah,
Houston. Yeah,
yeah,
it was pretty improbable what he did. And yeah, I think that's obviously the benchmark for what a legendary quarterback is. When the time is right for you to come and give your team a victory, whether you're from behind or whether the game's tied, and you're
right.
automatic. And Mahomes was automatic. I mean, I think I saw the stat that he only had one incompletion in the second half, and he didn't have
Yeah.
his numbers weren't gaudy by any means,
Oh.
but
Well,
he
they didn't need to be. They didn't need
no.
to be. And you know what? I'm not a Chiefs fan. In fact,
Mhm.
I despise, you know, the Chiefs, and but their fan base is the third most annoying fan base in the NFL. Packers
Mhm.
and Cowboys are 1 and 2.
Wow.
And as somebody who grew up in Chicago, obviously, anytime the Packers lose, we believe that an angel gets its wings. So so,
Well, there's
but
quite a few angels this year.
uh-huh, uh-huh. Um, but I had Mahomes on my fantasy football team, my office fantasy football team, and I had AJ Brown with
Mhm.
the Eagles. So I cruised to an office victory this year, right, right after I retired. So, I mean, I know that Mahomes, you give Mahomes the ball, magic's just going to happen. And it just, which, you know, I mean, it's a whole nother, Chicago Bear fans still go
Mhm.
nuts because the Bears could have had Mahomes.
Yeah, that's right. Do they draft Fields instead of
Yeah, they traded up
Mahomes?
and to Fields, and then Mahomes went after. It's like, you know, you
Yeah,
know,
and I think he's just another example of I guess in some ways how the the difference in the college game, the program has diminished so much because, coming from that Texas Tech air raid style of offense, people, question, you may be putting up 500 yards a game, passing the ball 400 yards, but, can you really play our style of football and do it, the way that we have typically done it for however many years now? And,
right.
he came in against the Chargers, I think, the last game of 2017, whenever Alex Smith was
Yeah,
sat down for just so he didn't get injured when they had a playoff game the next week, and he just tore it up. And I mean, I can remember being in Atlanta whenever I first moved there. I went to the Steeler bar that I ended up going to for a few years. It was my second time there, and Mahomes comes in and throws like 6 touchdowns, and people like, thought, he's going up against the Steeler defense. They always do well against, young
right.
players, and he just absolutely carved them apart. And watching that, I was like, man, this guy really is a sensational story so far.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he is. I mean, it's nice to see that, but when you're playing against them, you're like, oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
the story is pretty much written.
But when Mahomes started coming up, remember that ankle tackle
Mm-hmm.
and he
No,
was
yeah.
limping off like, ooh, I mean,
I thought the
but
Super Bowl was ruined at that point.
I did too. I'm like, oh, but then the flip side is you got Jalen Hurts, which is he's a hell of a story.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And I can
So
remember, I
yeah,
remember whenever he was in college being benched in the national
right.
championship game. I remember watching that, seeing him on the sideline with his helmet, and then they had made the announcement. I don't know who the sideline reporter was, but she had said that they were going with Tua, and I was like, did he get hurt or not? And it didn't seem like it. He still had his helmet on. I guess just what's his name? Saban thought that Tua had something to move the ball and against Georgia. And yeah, that's something that can really knock a guy off course, right? Psychologically, you're like, you just got benched in front of however many million people that were watching the game. You really
Yeah,
didn't do anything to lose your job. The Alabama was undefeated that year. He was having, a pretty decent season from what I remember, but he
yeah,
persevered, and then now he's proven that he can compete with anybody in the league.
yeah. He's one of the elite quarterbacks. I mean, at least, I mean, he had the best record. I think the Chiefs who had the best record at the end of the season. Was it the Chiefs or the Eagles?
They were tied.
They
I
were
think they
tied.
both. I
So
think they both finished 14 wins and 3 losses in the regular season.
yeah. So you lead a team to the best record in the one of the best records in the NFL. You make it to the Super Bowl,
Mm-hmm.
and the loss is not. I mean, he didn't do anything to lose that game. They just ran out of time.
Right.
I mean, he's, I'm hoping to see him back. I mean, next
Well,
year's
yeah, it's like,
fantasy football draft, he'll go number 1 or 2. I'm pretty sure.
oh yeah, easily. And yeah, it's kind of like the analogy to the Super Bowl that the Eagles won a few years ago. It's like when you have these offensive shootouts, more or less,
Yeah,
it comes down to just 1 or 2 plays on defense or on special teams that kind of make up the difference. And that was exactly what happened.
yeah. But it was a good game. But it was a
Yeah.
good game. I mean, it wasn't. I mean, I grew up in a time when most Super Bowls were blowouts. So I mean,
Yeah, I was like,
nowadays,
yeah, I was explaining that to my roommate last night, where there was a few years where it just wasn't really enjoyable to watch. You just had the Broncos getting blown out a couple times, the Bills, the Chargers.
Bills, the chart. I mean, I mean, starting with the first Super Bowl I saw, which was Super Bowl 11. I mean, the Oakland Raiders blew out the Vikings. The next year, the Cowboys blew out the Broncos.
Mm,
Super Bowl 13 to me is still the best Super Bowl ever. But then again, that was a 35-31
mhm.
game, and I was 12 years old at the time, and for many years that was the best Super Bowl out there. Just how bad the other Super Bowls were, and then it till you got to Super Bowl 25, and that's when things started to turn around, but it was slow. But yeah, nowadays, at least the Super Bowl, we go into it thinking, well, this should be a competitive game. But yeah, years and years before, it was a snore.
Yeah, I think the only real blowout I've seen in my lifetime was when Seattle destroyed Manning and the
Oh
Broncos.
yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty unbearable to watch. And
Well, in that game, when that snap went bad over
yeah, yeah,
Manning's head, like,
yeah.
yeah, that's the game right there. This is not going to go well. And it sure as shit, it did not go well for the Broncos.
Yeah, and it was a shame too, because you have one team that was the Legion of Boom. It was regarded as the best new defense in the league, and went on eventually become sort of like the defense of the decade. And then you had this record-setting offense. And
Yeah,
I think that was when Manning threw like 55 touchdowns to break Brady's 50 touchdown record, and he sat one game too, which was pretty remarkable. But yeah, that didn't really kind of come to fruition the way that we had all hoped to see the best, one of the best offenses in history versus a defense that had come into its own.
yeah, yeah. And then fortunately, a few years later, we got the flip side with the Broncos. Their defense comes in and just was unstoppable in Super Bowl 50 playing against Cam, and the Broncos defense just completely grounded the Panthers. And you had Peyton Manning just kind of playing. I mean, all he had to do was manage the game, just not make any mistakes.
Yeah.
And that was so. But yeah, no, and it'll be interesting to see how things progress. I mean, where's the Super Bowl being played at next year? Do you know off the top of your head?
Vegas.
Okay.
which I'm sure Pete Rozelle is rolling around in his grave right now.
Oh man, that's well, and that kind of goes into probably what want to talk about just kind of where the football is heading to.
Mm-hmm.
And gambling obviously is a huge factor in with sports nowadays. But it is funny now that I'm thinking about it, talking about Vegas. Um, this year, I mean, the ads were out there for FanDuel and all the gambling, but not as much as in years past. Did you notice that at all?
The only FanDuel commercial that I remember seeing was the Gronk,
Okay,
which I didn't really follow what that was leading up into it. So to me,
right.
it just looked like shit from the beginning. But um, yeah, I guess now that you mentioned it, didn't see too many commercials. I mean, there was DraftKings and what was the other one?
FanDuel.
Yeah, yeah. I think I saw one of each, but
I didn't
that
see
might have
any
been it.
Caesars commercials with actually are kind of my favorite anyway because it's got the Mannings and it's got JB Smoove. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, we've got we're in an era nowadays where, like you said, Pete Rozelle has got to be rolling over his grave with the way gambling is so infiltrated, not just football but sports in general.
Hmm.
Now that I mean, and they were talking. Who was I listening to? They were talking. I think it was maybe Dan Patrick. I was listening to the other day and they were talking about, well, how do you keep games from being fixed now? Well, obviously, these guys get paid so much money. They don't need to. I mean, the temptation for these guys, I don't think there's any temptation because they're making so much money
Hmm.
just to play the game itself. I mean, um, but yeah, no, it's, I don't know actually where I'm going with this, but
Well, it's
just the
funny you bring.
gambling aspect is just, it still blows my mind after all these years.
Well, it's funny you bring that up because recently I've been, flipping through Dan Moldea's book Interference about how organized crime infiltrates professional football, and the book was published back in the late '80s. So in a lot of ways, it's dated
Right.
and it may not hold up as well. But it is interesting in some of the things that you look at that could still be a factor, right? Like obviously, a bookmaker would have a hard time convincing a guy to throw a game, through bribery because you're not going to match his salary.
Right.
Maybe someone in college, I suspect it would be possible, but even then, I'm not sure that you could really get away with it just because of how much security is probably around those kids from especially the bigger schools, in which I'm
Right.
sure they have like security personnel to watch these kids and make sure that they're not getting in trouble in the community or
Mm-hmm.
something. But one aspect that he did bring up when he interviewed, I think it was Warren Welsh, who was one of the former NFL security directors, that if a guy like has a history of drugs, right, and all of a sudden he gets into a little bit of a bad habit, all a guy has to do if he's in debt to his drug dealer, say, hey, you shave some points and your debt is wiped clean. So I guess in some ways it would
Yeah.
have to be more through extortion means if you're going to get someone to fix the game. But yeah, just through straight bribery, I'm not sure it's possible anymore.
Right. And then there's also the other added thing too, which we didn't even talk about, but we live in a day and age where everything is recorded, everything's out in the open.
Oh yeah.
I mean, we all walk around literally with, I mean, we all walk around with things in our pockets that make us, we can report live from anywhere in the world and take
Yeah.
pictures that the quality of is way better than anything anybody could have dreamed about back in the 20th century. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, yeah, we got Vegas next year, but yeah, the whole gambling. I mean, do you see? I mean, and you're much younger than me, so I mean, um, do you foresee in the future even more gambling, or I mean, do you think we reach a saturation point where, you know,
As long as it makes the NFL a profit, then yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I think it's just one of those situations. Like, I personally don't bet on sports. I mean, for me, if I bet, it's like I'll go to a casino and play blackjack, or if I'm playing pool,
right,
I'll put 20 bucks on a game or something like that. But I personally don't bet on anything that I can't really have some sort of direct involvement in.
oh yeah,
Um,
yeah. I was
so
explaining this to my wife the other day. I don't understand why anybody would throw money away.
yeah, I mean, well, because the reward you could get, right? I mean, it's
Right.
like, you could take a loss, but you could also double your money, So it's like, for the NFL, if it continues to make them a profit and drives people, then yeah, absolutely, it's going to continue to increase. Will there ever be a tipping point? Probably not. I mean, I
Mm.
think that obviously with how fantasy is going and prop bets and parlays, I think there's a lot of intrigue
Right.
for people who aren't even sports fan, which
Yeah.
that's something I think that has really kind of defined Roger Goodell's career, is how he's been able to increase the sports appeal to non-football fans. I mean,
Right.
people, I know people who, will watch maybe, some game on Sunday, but they're not going out of their way to watch it the same way I would. But they have a fantasy team and they keep up with it and they set their
Yeah.
lineup every week, even if they watch the game or not. And it's the same thing, I guess, with sports betting too. It's like you may not have any rooting interest in either one of these teams or know who any of the players are, but you'll just look at the numbers of who's doing what and you'll place a bet. So I
Right.
think as long as it continues to bring in, non-fans to the game, then yeah, absolutely, it's going to get even bigger.
Yeah. And with the sport itself, so we've got, now that the Super Bowl's over, but we definitely got more football coming up
Mm-hmm.
the rest of this year. So we're entering into, I mean, this coming Sunday, the XFL kicks off.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts? So you think, I mean, this is the XFL, this is obviously version 3.0,
Yeah.
but what do you think? I mean, I don't know. I'm just gonna, I'll let you tell me what you think, and I'll tell you what I think in terms of where I think spring football is going, and just from my experiences as a kid watching the other leagues growing up.
Well, Orlando, where I live, is actually getting a team, so I'm going to follow them and actually go to some of the games. It's the Orlando Guardians. Um, Aside from that, I'm not really sure. I think there's 8 teams total.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's hard to be, overly optimistic that it's going to perform well. Obviously, back in 2001, that collapsed for a multitude of reasons. And yeah, that was also a much different point in American culture where, we didn't have any streaming. The internet didn't really play that big of a factor in people's entertainment value. So just more of a utensil than it was, a lifestyle brand or choice, I guess you could say. So
Right.
you didn't really have to worry about streaming. You had cable, obviously, that would maybe add some competition, but the 3 networks reign supreme still. And they tried something out whenever they thought they could maybe find a new audience, and again, there's a lot that went into it that kind of led to that collapse. But 20 years later, they try it again in a more saturated media environment. So
Yeah.
I guess there's maybe you're never going to get a totally huge fan base like maybe you would have, a few years ago when you try to experiment with it. But
Right. Did
I
you,
go on.
I'm trying to think, did you interview the author of The Long Bomb on your show?
Yeah,
On the
Brett
foot?
Forrest. Yeah,
That's what I thought. Yeah.
yeah.
Which, go ahead. I didn't mean, I just wanted to interject that in there. That's a great interview you did with him.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, he was interesting to talk to just because of how long ago the book was written. I mean, I think the book was
Right.
published in 2002 and I spoke to him 20 years later. And
Yeah.
given how the the drive is still there to try to find some sort of alternative football league, I thought was a relevant conversation. And I haven't spoken to him since I did that interview, but I know he said that they were looking to do an audiobook version and release a paperback version of the book by the time this new league comes out. So I wonder if there's any update on that. But I think, in that conversation, it just highlights that people will go for football as long as it's good football, and
Right.
I don't really recall watching too much of the XFL in the right before COVID. I paid a little more attention to the AAF because there was an Atlanta team and that I went to
Right.
a couple of their games. So for me, I paid a little more attention, but just seeing how, both of those leagues ended up collapsing, like I said, it's hard to have any sense of optimism. But
Yeah.
I mean, the USFL is back for, round 2, which I, was kind of skeptical if that was actually going to happen. So, maybe, and from what I understand, the USFL is not even kicking off until like April or something
Right.
like that.
So their seasons don't even overlap.
Yeah. So
There's, yeah, I
maybe,
mean, but
maybe
they,
people will have a natural intrigue. I
yeah.
suspect that maybe the first couple weeks or maybe, the couple weeks following week 1 are going to suffer a little bit just because I think there is a little bit
Right.
of football fatigue. But yeah, if the product is good enough, maybe people will tune in, but that is a big if.
And I hope so. I mean, I'm very critical. Anybody who follows me on social media knows I'm very critical, especially the XFL and the
Mm-hmm.
Rock and all the faith put in when I ask people, and I do apologize. on your end, can you hear the construction going on my end?
No.
Okay, good, because I have a whole ton of construction. So thank God software is able to filter all the noise, the jackhammers in the back out. But going back to what I said, on social media, I'm very critical of the XFL, not so much of the USFL, because I kind of get how the USFL is trying to market their league by, okay, we're going to test this out in front of a TV audience and go from there.
Mhm.
Whereas the XFL, it's like, boom. I mean, to me, it's like, okay, we're going to be like the old AFL. We're going to start in cities that don't have to, and this is what we're going to do. And so, you had several examples of leagues that have failed just in the recent past. You had the AAF, which failed spectacularly. Obviously, you had the XFL,
Mhm.
and also too the Arena Football League went away. I mean, you've had all these other leagues, these spring leagues, kind of either fizzle away, flop. But the one thing that you kind of touched upon it when it came to the football was actually pretty good. AAF football quality was good. The XFL 2.0 was good, but it didn't stick around long enough. Obviously the pandemic, forced it to close. But then you had the XFL back in 2001, and the football in that just completely sucked. I mean, it was like watching practice squads. It was just horrible football. But there was a lot of things they actually got right too with Vince McMahon and how we have Skycam because of the XFL, the
Yeah,
original XFL.
there was definitely a lot of innovations that were
Yeah.
drawn from it. Like I never watched that Ebersol documentary about this was the XFL.
It's really good.
But
It's definitely worth your time, man.
yeah, I'll definitely. It's definitely been on my list for a while. But yeah, to your point, I mean, to be honest, most of the games I did watch from that season, because before Brett came on the show, I wanted to go back and watch those
Yeah.
games and kind of put myself in that mindset. But most of the games I did watch were either the LA Extreme or the Las Vegas Outlaws, because Brett had followed that team specifically throughout the season. But something that you think is interesting is that you said the Arena Football League last, like it was something that people had forgotten about. I don't think it's any coincidence that league had actually stood the test of time for however many years. And I've said this before, and obviously we have a lot of crossover in our audience, so I apologize if people are hearing me say this again. But when I watch another football league, I don't want to watch a carbon copy of the NFL. If the product is really that good, fine. But truthfully, if the product was going to be that good, they'd be playing in the NFL, right? For me, if you really want to get my attention, I'll watch a league that has bizarre rule changes, multiple men in motion. You can only, you can have unlimited forward passes behind the line. Anybody behind the line of scrimmage can catch a pass. I'll watch that all day. And I don't care if I'm the only one who's watching it. I think a reason why something like, the Arena League did well is because we know this isn't, NFL football, but that's what makes it cool. It's quirky, it's unique.
And going back to what I said about the Arena Football League, they were around for a long time, but their business model, but those teams came and went. So in many ways, it kind of felt, even though the league was around for a long time, it always felt like every year it was a new league because you just had different teams coming and going. There was no stability with the franchises other than, say, with the Arizona Rattlers. I mean, the Arizona Rattlers and the Tampa Bay Storm were around for a long time. Orlando Predators were around for a long time, but no real stability. None of the teams that, when the league finally did fold, none of those leagues were any of the original teams. So to me, it just kind of like, it felt like the AFL kind of felt like when I was in Iraq. Somebody said, well, we've been here in Iraq 7 years. And somebody said, what I worked on when I was as a intelligence advisor, Army officer made the comment, no, we've been here 1 year for 7 years. So you had turnover every year. So to me, while the AFL was around, the Arena Football League was around many years, it just, each year it just felt like a different league because so many teams came and went. But going back to what you were saying, but with these leagues though, I mean, the product on the field, especially, let's talk about the product that was on the field in the last, say, 10 years. Good product on the field. AAF, the XFL, last year the USFL had good product. But to me, where it's always come down to, it's on the business end of these leagues that they completely fall flat. And going back to what you said about the original XFL, that business, that just, everybody got paid, but Vince McMahon pulled the plug because it wasn't going to make him any money.
Well, it
He
seems to
figured
me
out.
that the original XFL was more of a marketing problem than it was a financial problem.
Right.
Well, it eventually translated into being a financial problem, but people just didn't know what they were exactly tuning in for. Were they tuning in to watch serious football? Were they turning in to watch, a football version of WWE? No one really knew exactly like how to quite market it. When you get
Right.
Jesse Ventura ready to fight the Chicago coach on the field after they lost, you're kind of looking at it. You're like, is this stage? Is it serious? Like no one really knew. And I think for a lot of the players and the coaches, they wanted, football the way they had always known it in the NFL or in college. And then all of a sudden when they get all these cameras really intrusive in people's faces and player introductions and the showmanship of it and, the sex appeal of it all, I think there was a clear divide between what the, what NBC wanted, what McMahon wanted. And I think in many cases, NBC and, McMahon didn't really understand what each other wanted for the product. And I think that there was never a coherent, definition or vision for what the league should be. And ultimately they didn't really know how to market it. And people said, well, this is all well and good, but the product isn't even that good for me to stick long enough to figure this out. So they just abandoned it.
Yeah, that book. I mean, his book.
And the fact that they continue to play their games on Saturday night too, which is like the least view, is the worst night for television,
Right.
For viewership. That was not a good decision either.
Yeah. And I think these new leagues have taken those lessons and learned, but the AAF, obviously, they learned a lot of lessons, but they just ran out of money.
Yeah.
Charlie, and you would think of all the people that would fail at this, how could Charlie Ebersol have failed at the AAF? But that's a book that I'm waiting to read on the AAF. There is a documentary on it if you've seen it.
No, I heard the interview Tim Hamlin did with the director. I don't remember the name of it though.
Yeah, Tim did a great job. That was a great interview. But I would love to read a book that gets into the nitty gritty, much like Mark Speck's books about the World Football League, get into the WFL, and there's, like you said, there's a great the Long Bomb. That gets into so much detail, and you walk away from that book going, okay, yeah, now it makes sense. And even with Vince McMahon trying to buy his way into the CFL.
Oh, that's happening again?
No, but that was back then.
Oh,
if you remember in that book, that's kind of how that started. I think the XFL, that's how the XFL came to being when, they wouldn't, he couldn't
get into the NFL or the CFL.
Right.
Well, what was it? What was his, I don't think he was just trying to get a team. Wasn't he trying to buy the league outright?
He wanted to buy the whole league. He said, well, how about the league? I think if I remember correctly, it started with the Argos, but then he's like, well, I'll buy the whole league. And, the CFL governor said, go pound sand. You're not buying our team. You're not going to buy our teams.
Right.
So,
yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the consistent thread through all these stories, right? It's about the rejects that, maybe don't have quite enough money, or they just can't break into the big leagues with, the NFL for some reason. So they try to set out on their own. I guess, obviously going back to the arena, Jim Forrest was probably the exception to the rule, because, he was more, someone who came up in the NFL, corporate side than he was, as an owner. But I think it's, when it comes to like a book about the AAF though, I don't know if there's too much there that you can really go into, because they never even finished a full season. From what I remember, they only got halfway. Is that correct? Do you remember?
They got, I think, up until like week 8 or maybe week 7.
Yeah.
It was, or in fact, talking about Orlando, that the team in Orlando was, I think, ultimately determined to have won the championship, because I think Steve Spurrier went out and bought everybody rings or something.
I think that was
like that.
Well, they had a team in Tampa, I think.
No, it was the Orlando Apollos.
That's right. Okay, so the XFL was had Tampa, right?
Yeah, which that team name is now out in Vegas.
The Vipers.
Which, Yeah, which they're going to be playing. And this gets into my, I'm just curious to see what the first week one of the XFL looks like, because last I heard, I think the Vipers are playing at the minor league ballpark, which,
Mhm.
hey, I love what the aesthetics of football and baseball parks, but when, you're starting off playing in a baseball park and a major metropolitan area and a minor league ballpark, that's just not a good. I'm just curious how that's going to look on camera. So, and how fans are going to take to it, going, okay, are we going to watch minor league football? I mean, people go out. I mean, nobody puts minor league baseball down, so I don't understand why anybody would put minor league football down. But in this country, in America, well, not in this country because I'm in Japan, but in the States, if it's not NFL, very few people are going to pay attention. If it's not NFL or college football, major college football, very few people are going to tune in.
Well, last night, one of the people who was over at our apartment had actually asked about, like, you guys down to go see some Guardian games. And he's someone who's I don't think he has a team loyalty, but he loves fantasy, he loves
Right.
watching the game just as just a third party viewer, I guess you could say. If
Okay.
there's no one, he pretty much looks out for his fantasy team, so to speak,
Okay.
and then but just enjoys,
Yeah.
just enjoys watching the game, right? Well, he actually brought it up, so for me, I thought that was kind of surprising because
Okay.
if anybody was going to bring that up, it would be me because I'm
Yeah.
just fascinated more so than he would be, but I think the potential is there, for something to come to fruition, if nothing else, just for the novelty and the spectacle of it. But
Right.
that's only going to last you a few weeks. Even for me, watching the, I was actually at an Atlanta Hawks game whenever the, I can't remember what the name of the Atlanta team was, the Legends, I think, that for the AAF.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I was checking my phone throughout the Hawks game, interested to see, what was
Right.
happening and everything like that. But then, progressively you just start tuning in a little less and less. And
Yeah.
then, I went to one game where they played at Georgia State Stadium. And even then you just see kind of the crowd had just diminished from what it looked to me on television, the
Right.
first night watching it. So yeah, there's definitely going to be some trial and error, and where the USFL really has that their strength is that they're owned by Fox.
Right.
They can afford, they have people who are so in touch with the product because they own the product, so they know how to market it,
Yeah.
they know how to have it as a good operations. And I think in a lot of ways they're looking at this like what it is, and it's a developmental league. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they not only for the players but also for the broadcasters. I mean, they have Drew Brees, I think, coming over from NBC to do some games. I mean, they have some of their own talent that are gonna, do some sideline reporting as sort of a stepping stone. So when they want to get to the NFL, or if that ever happens, but I think there's a certain self-awareness with the USFL. And I didn't really watch too much of the league last year, but I think there is a self-awareness that if I had to guess right now without seeing the XFL or without seeing any XFL games so far, they probably have a little bit more of an advantage in the long run.
Yeah. I mean, it's because football obviously is. We saw with fan control football, they tried to turn, and that's right. I completely forgot about fan control football turning into kind of a studio product.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I think we've reached a point now too, with kind of what you said about the USFL. It's owned by Fox, and I mean, football is very much a TV product. So, um, you know, yeah, I mean, it's amazing just how much, even when we think about it too, with football, how much football is dependent upon television, because we had the NFL during the pandemic, didn't have any fans in the stand. They still made money. The NFL still made money, but then on the flip side, you had the CFL would shut down because they weren't going to make any money by not, you know, by
Right.
not having asses in the seats. So,
Let me ask you a question then, because obviously we kind of live in a more fragmented media environment. Do you think that because the Arena League supposedly is coming back out in 2024, I believe?
right.
I mean, do you think that there's going to be an audience, a sizable audience for them? And I mean, could something like that even survive today? Because obviously we've had like the indoor football league and some other leagues that are based indoors and the similar concepts. Like, do you think it would have the same draw as it did when it first came out, or in its heyday in the early 2000s?
You know what? I don't know. I don't know. And I mean, if you put it in the major markets,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you put a team back in Chicago, if you bring the Rush back and put them in Allstate Stadium, or put them at Wintrust Arena, you put them in a major. You need to have teams that are in the major markets, and I haven't looked at the lineup in terms of where they're going with these teams, but unless you have the major markets,
There's a lot of teams in the Midwest.
yeah,
Yeah.
Quad City, the Quad City. I think they're team. Maybe they're bringing.
Wichita,
I don't
I
know.
know, is getting.
Yeah, but the NFL was a regional league until it finally put itself in the major cities. So until I think you plant the flag in major cities and draw crowds, because do you remember when the NFL had the Arena Football League?
No, I did not know that actually was the thing. They owned it.
Yes, it was. And actually, when I mean, that was a good product. The way the NFL, I think the NFL learned, not the NFL, NBC, sorry,
Oh,
NBC
NBC.
with
Yeah.
the Arena
Okay. Yeah.
Football
Yeah.
League.
Yeah. Yeah. I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
So NBC had the Arena Football League. This was after the XFL thing,
Mm-hmm.
and it was great product. I mean,
Yeah.
those games, you would tune into a Rush game at Allstate and you would see Allstate Arena packed.
Mm-hmm.
And the games were good. And I don't know really what the business decisions were behind that, why that didn't work out. But there was that moment that I thought the arena football, this spring football might work if we keep it indoors. Because the other factor that comes into play with spring football is weather. Because you start off right after the Super Bowl, which the XFL is doing, but the XFL is not playing. I mean, it's really a southern southwestern league. I
So
mean, you've got a team in St. Louis, but that's in a dome.
do you think that works against the league then if it's pretty much just mild climate? Yeah.
I think it does. I mean, you don't have teams in your major markets. I mean, you don't even have a team in LA this year with the XFL.
But when you look at how many NFL teams are now getting stadiums, which essentially is reducing the elements into the game. I mean, do you think people even care about that anymore?
I think if you want to, I know for me, I will not go see a Bears game right before I left Chicago. Yeah, my brother went and saw a Bears game in December against the Vikings, and it was a nice day, but it was a rare nice day. But he was even talking. He's like, I don't know if I'm want to. I don't know what I was thinking when I bought these tickets. It's like, but for the,
Wait, so are you saying that if they had like cold, frigid weather, that if they reduced that people would actually be inclined to watch it more or go to the games more?
No, go to the games. Not so much watch it more, but go to the games.
Gotcha.
And back when the XFL played,
Mm-hmm.
they had teams in cold weather cities. I would have to look at the numbers to see how attendance was, but I don't think attendance was great, especially in places like Chicago and New York. I mean, they didn't fill the stadium up, but the other thing too with the XFL, the first version, the way they did their camera stuff, you couldn't tell how many people were in those stands. And especially by the time it got to the championship game, they might as well have been playing in a studio for all the crowd shots they showed, because there was just no way to tell if anybody was there. So I think, I don't know, my thing is, unless you put a league into major markets, whether it be, the USFL, the XFL, I think you're always going to be considered kind of rinky dink, for lack of a better term, rinky dink. And I don't mean that as a put down, but when most, the vast majority of football fans in the United States are NFL fans, yeah, they're going to look down. It's like, yeah, I'm not going to watch. I mean, it's not, there's, I don't want to say, an elitist attitude towards football that I think you and I have seen as fans of, whether it be the CFL, the alternative leagues, going, oh, I didn't know they were coming. There's, everybody's, once football ends, like this after yesterday, people get on with their lives. Now we've got baseball coming up. People turn to basketball. Hockey's going to be in full swing, and all those sports have their own issues too when it comes to attendance and ratings and that. So,
Well, I mean, the thing about like those three sports is none of them really have a national following that the NFL has. So it's like in certain parts of the country, hockey will be much more of a draw for that audience. You
right,
know, so some big markets will be all over baseball. Like, I mean, whenever I went to a Hawks game, like it was fine, but I mean, it's definitely more of a Braves town from when I was living in Atlanta. So it's like some will
right,
be very much into the baseball aspect of it. But yeah, I think there's going to be there's going to be something that can be taken with the audience. Yeah, it's just about whether you're going to be able to have enough to justify the cost of production and the cost of operations. You know,
yeah, yeah,
because yeah,
Wh-
it's because and then another thing too, it's like you and I have both talked about watching a lot of old games on YouTube,
uh-huh,
and those there are some channels that will get just thousands upon thousands, hundreds of thousands of views for a video. Whether it's a
yeah,
1985 game, 1995, even earlier, going back to the 70s. I mean, those videos do get a lot of views, and you kind of
yeah,
wonder, do people really want to watch a bunch of guys who may or may not make a roster, or would they rather see a lot of guys from their childhood, guys like me who never saw these people play in real
yeah,
time? It's kind of it can be kind of a crapshoot to figure out like the psychology of like what would make a person forego doing something like that, or watching maybe one of the other three big sports that they have
mhm,
maybe somewhat of an interest in to watch
yeah.
another football league.
Well, again, it goes in what you just said about YouTube. So we've become so fragmented. I mean, the TV landscape I grew up with, and even with what you grew up in, is changed so much
Mhm.
in just the last 10 years. We are very fragmented. We, you know, there are still traditional broadcasters, but the vast, I mean, I live in Japan, so, I don't have, I mean, I watch my TV through the internet, and it's all on demand. And you've got these leagues. I mean, the NFL is going with YouTube TV next year for the direct TV, for the NFL Sunday ticket, which, just kind of go off topic here. Being here in Japan, the one thing I was worried about when I got here was, how do I watch my football?
Mhm.
So the NFL has an international game pass. It's basically the same game pass that they have in the States, with the exception, for the same price, you can watch all the games live here. All the games live. You know how much it costs?
No.
$100 a year.
Oh
That's it.
wow.
And
Interesting.
I mean, the NFL has figured out how to print money, and
Well,
they're print.
you get that through the NFL app, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay, yeah. I think over here it's I think it comes out to being $100 too, but obviously you can get all the games internationally, whereas we are limited to a
Right.
red zone or for the local market games.
Yeah. Well, and then if you want to see if you want to have your choice of be able to see any game you want,
Hmm.
you've got to pay, because this was part of me moving over here. I ended up signing for the Sunday ticket
Hmm.
because I wasn't sure when I was going to be leaving. I'm like, hell, I'm going to have to, because I got to watch my Cardinals, which, looking back at it, was a giant waste of money anyway, but that's a whole nother conversation. Um, the NFL charges Americans who live in the United States an ungodly amount of money, whereas I'm over here, it's like it cost me one fourth the price to see everything. It's much, much, much cheaper. But going back to what I was saying about streaming, everything is streamed now. So the XFL, they're going to be on traditional network, but they're also going to ESPN Plus.
Hmm.
So, I mean, the way we watch TV now is so much different. And just it's, I mean, you've got pay services and everything. So, um,
Well,
you
something
know,
that's also becoming really popular, I'm not sure. Well, I guess it's good. So obviously, what they call like fast channels, which is free ad supported television.
right.
Yeah, that's something like Pluto TV, if you've ever heard
Yeah.
of that, or like
Yeah.
a lot of like if you buy a Vizio television set, you'll have channels already available for you to watch. A
Hmm.
lot of these channels that are available are owned by big media companies, right? So let's say
Right.
if
Pluto TV is actually, I just learned the other day, Pluto TV is owned by Paramount.
which
Yeah.
which owns CBS. So it's like, who's to say if CBS wants to make a run at the Arena League, right? Maybe
Right.
they can put their games on Pluto TV and make money, via ad revenue. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And plus, you're getting a lot more people that obviously with more prices increasing with streaming services, and they find that they have increasingly less to watch, either just because there's information overload and too many choices for them to make, or maybe they just don't want to have that many services and just like a traditional um cable format, but not have to pay the bill, which you can get with like a Pluto TV, a Vizio
Yeah.
TV, Tubi TV is the same way. So I think
Yeah.
it's definitely, I think that's also another major option for like a lot of the networks. I mean, the NFL has an NFL channel on Pluto TV, which I'm sure you've seen, where
Yeah.
they will air, games from 10 or 15 years ago.
Oh
So
yeah. Yeah.
so it's possible they could look at that as another potential avenue as well.
Yeah. It's just amazing how much the landscape has changed. I mean,
Hmm.
and the frustrating part for me is being over here. A lot of these, you can't. ESPN Plus is only available in the U.S., but I have a VPN, and so I've been playing with VPNs to try to get around that, and it's a challenge. So it'll be
Yeah.
interesting next week. And I don't think I'm going to be able to watch the game because I'm going to be taking a trip down here to one of the Navy bases. Um, but when I get back, to be able to try to figure out how to watch the XFL via the VPN, because with the smart devices are really smart, and sometimes they let the world, exactly where you are versus where you want to be seen. So
Right.
using a VPN overseas to watch sports is tricky, but it can be done. But yeah, the whole aspect of just streaming and everything. I'm just, at some point though, it just, the NFL makes all their money from TV. I mean, that's the other part that people don't quite understand. Without TV, the NFL, nobody, I mean, I think it would be much like it was back in the 50s. It would still be kind of a small time sport. So, but it's to me, when I watch everything and I look at I'm still amazed by everything. Um,
Yeah, I mean,
but with,
I work in television as my full time occupation, so it's definitely something that I get a lot of updates on and have to keep track of, so to speak. So
yeah,
yeah, it definitely went from being just a pretty simple, you have three networks, to whenever cable came out, you had a lot of these niche channels that still would draw a big audience. I mean, realistically, if had 49 channels, let's say, you're still talking about limited space in the pre-internet era for content and entertainment.
right.
But now, yeah, it just feels like there's so much in the void that it's hard to really kind of figure out how you can get that mass audience now that guys like or CBS, NBC. I mean, there's always like a brand identity that's been around that's always going to draw
Right.
a big audience, and especially since
Right.
you have live sports. I mean, out of the 100 top most watched programs, I think 97 were live pro
Football.
sports. Yeah, I mean
Yeah. It's all
it,
football. You look at the, top, other than MASH, that
yeah.
final episode of MASH. I mean, it's pretty much all
Well,
football.
I'm just talking 2022.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as long as you have like some sort of sports, especially football. I mean, you're almost you're just
Hmm.
positioning yourself for to succeed.
Right. Yeah. And and when it comes to the NFL, let's just move on. Just talking about football globally. Then, being here in Japan, it's amazing. When I got here, I mean, this is a baseball country,
Mhm.
and soccer is, when I got here, right when the World Cup was being played, and so there was a big grounds. Every channel I turned on was talking about the World Cup and the World Cup. And, I do the podcast with John Gunning and BJ Beatty over at Gridiron Japan, and we
Mhm.
cover, foot, American football, gridiron football here in Japan. And, I'm able to see all the games live via streaming, online with
Mhm.
the X League, and also via YouTube, because a lot of the colleges play and a lot of the other leagues put their stuff on YouTube. Um, but when I, sitting there one day, it's right after we got here, going, man, there's nothing going on in this country on, I mean, Sundays. But the X League was playing. It's just like, man, football could be so big here because to me, football is the ultimate team sport, and being in Japan, it's all about the group. It's all about, the goal is, everybody's a team player whether they want to be or not, or they're expected to be a team player whether they want to be or not. Um, do you see, as we're moving on, because we got the NFL talking about expansion, where do you see the game growing internationally?
Well, if the game last year in Germany was any indication, I think there's a big demand, at least in multiple parts of Europe. Um, I've read at various points that arena football actually has a little bit of an appeal over in China, which I know is a market that the NFL would love to get its hands on after seeing the success it had with basketball, which,
Right.
obviously is a much more translatable game. But again, arena football is a good introduction into football. I mean, whenever I spoke with Chuck Klosterman a couple weeks ago, we had a discussion about this towards the end of the episode where, in my opinion, I think something like 6-man football would be a really great game to introduce the rest of the world to, because 6-man football, you can still have the core concepts of the game. You still keep
Yeah.
the identity of it, albeit just on a smaller scale. And I think that would
Right.
be great to like introduce to other countries, right? Like say, in this version of the sport, everybody is eligible, but like once you begin to learn nuances, you start incorporating the full game and you realize not everybody is eligible, then you expand on the rule books. I think something like that would be a little more simpler, because from what I understand, anytime I talk about this subject, what a lot of people internationally maybe don't see the appeal is because it's just they don't really know what's going on, right? It's like they have
Right.
meetings in between plays and they just look at the sport and think that there's just so much complexity to it that it's almost needlessly complex. So
Yeah.
maybe it's something like 6 or 8-man football or some variations of arena football would be, advantageous to try to expand the game in markets that are definitely a lot more foreign to us. I mean, Germany, London, obviously. I mean, even going back to NFL Europe with, the Amsterdam Admirals, there's a
Hmm.
lot of countries that are, exposed to the game in its full form that obviously
Yeah.
are drawn to it. But maybe in smaller countries or maybe more Eastern countries, maybe 6-man arena, that would be a better game to introduce to them if it not already.
Yeah.
Which, interesting
Uh,
enough, actually, I saw from that college football Reddit page, they actually had posted a 6-man football game in Japan
they
not too
did.
long ago. Yeah, I'll share the link with you. Actually,
Okay.
I
I
was
did not
surprised to
know that.
see it
I'll have to add that. Was it an outdoor game or indoor game?
outdoor. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I think it
And
was.
well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I don't know if it was a college game, X League game.
Oh,
I don't
definitely
really
wasn't.
remember, but
I'm sure it wasn't an X League game, but probably a college game. I mean, who knows? Yeah, no, send me the link.
yeah,
I definitely
definitely.
like to take a look at that. Um, talking about Japan. So, I got here. So right after, one of the first things I did when I got here was try to figure out who in my family knows anything about football. When I'm talking about my family here in Japan. As it turns out, my brother-in-law knows football.
Yeah,
And so we got, it's and I hadn't seen him in years. I mean, we got here. I hadn't seen my in-laws in 10 years. So, in the settling in process and using the smartphones to talk to each other and figure out. It's like, yeah, I know about. He goes, Joe Montana? And
yeah,
he said 76ers. I go, no, 49ers. So as as things kind of progressed, I figured out, hey, my brother-in-law knows about American football, knows about Joe Montana and the 49ers because he played video games.
I was just
And
about to.
that's how he,
I,
yeah,
I
that's
was just
how he
about. I
learned.
was just about to ask, was that through Nintendo? Because I know Montana had his own game, and I'm sure he
Yeah,
probably released a lot of games over there.
yeah. And so we got to talking and he's like, yeah. And I go, well, all my video games, because at this time, all my stuff was on a boat being shipped over. And I'm like, well, when my PS4, my PS3, and my Sega gets here, we'll play football. So, and all that arrived safely and everything. And it's like, I'm all set up here. And him and I, it was kind of cool. Um, After it arrived, we got down and we played Tecmo Bowl on the Sega.
Nice.
But also, like the month beforehand, him, me, and my wife. Now, my wife has watched football with me, has never quite understood the game. Um, the three of us went to the Koshien Bowl, which is the college
Mhm.
football national championship game. Um, and so it was that moment where when we went there, played an old baseball. It's played in the Japanese version of Wrigley Field, and I try to use Wrigley Field more than Fenway Park, but it's the oldest stadium and oldest baseball stadium professionally in Japan, and Babe Ruth played there, um, so we got to see the game being played there on the turf. I want to say, I probably 18,000 people were there at the game,
Mhm.
which for me, I was actually pretty impressed. I know they've had much bigger crowds in the past. Um, but that moment you're like, okay, well, people, football does have a global appeal. So it'd be cool to, it would be cool to see Japan really, really embrace the sport and make it its own. And it's possible, but, um, there's
Well,
just,
I,
you
I I
know,
think I think the biggest thing that would need to happen is that there needs to be a Japanese player that finds some sort of role in the National Football League. It's not going to
right.
be. Yeah, I'd be willing to bet my bottom dollar that you're never going to find someone that's going to be a superstar in the league. But I think you and I talked about this earlier. Like, in my opinion, if you could have a Japanese player that had a sort of Danny Woodhead role that he
Uh-huh.
had with the Patriots, sort of a scat back.
Yeah.
I think it's possible to have someone like that come over from Japan to play in a role like that. Probably someone undrafted, smaller college sort of a deal. He's in a system where he's not a feature guy, but he could come in for a lot of big plays and make his
Right.
mark that way.
Right.
I think something like that would have to happen for the league to really kick off, so to speak, in Japan.
I I agree. I agree. We've got Toshiki Sato, who is going to be, he was on the Argonauts.
Mhm.
He was their backup punter and kicker, but he signed on with Calgary Stampeders, and
Mhm.
he's heading up there. So hopefully, fingers crossed, he's going to
Yeah.
be the full-time guy up there with this season. But yeah, I agree with you. Until okay, so way back in the day when Hideo Nomo pitched for the Dodgers,
Mhm.
he was the breakthrough star that led to Ichiro, which now has led to God, every team seeming having somebody from Japan on their team except the White Sox. Um, but yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think until that player comes,
Yeah.
and there are quality players here in Japan,
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, you
and
watching some of the college games the past couple of years. I mean, they've really just have a very
yeah,
precise understanding of the game.
they do. And the college championship game was a great game, especially the first half. Second half,
Mhm.
not so much. But you watch these kids play here, and these kids know the game. It's not sloppy football. High school national championship,
The Christmas Bowl.
the Christmas Bowl. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean that was a good game. That was a good game. And you got to watch the Dream Bowl, obviously. So I was hoping to get your thoughts on that in terms of where you think the Japanese talent stacks up against that from the States.
Well, I think if you're ever explaining, football in Japan to someone, you can ask, like, so how good are they? You can say, they're probably as good as, the middle of the road players in D1 AA, right? I mean, maybe, they could be considered top line of Division One AA in
Yeah.
some regards. I mean, that they had that, it was a really close game and they had a one. And truthfully, they almost had opportunity when the guy in the fourth quarter muffed the punt
Mm-hmm.
that they ended up recovering, but and scoring a touchdown through there. But I mean, I think it just kind of highlights how and a lot of those games, and it's escaping me how long that Dream Bowl has been played, but obviously there have been All Star games that have been played between Japan's
Right.
college All Stars and some variation of the U.S. West Coast teams or something like that. And sometimes they were competitive, sometimes they could be blowouts. It just kind of depends on
Mm-hmm.
the preparation and who how sometimes the US, I guess, can treat it more like a Pro Bowl, so to speak, and rotate players in as opposed to
Right.
playing the starters the whole way. But I think it shows how good the product is over there. And to be honest, going what we were talking about earlier, I think one way to really boost the sports exposure over there would be for something like ESPN Plus or one of the smaller sports streaming services like Stadium to stream that game. Yeah,
Yeah.
and there's going to be a little bit of a language barrier in terms of pronouncing, the
Right.
names. No doubt, there's obviously extensive research, but if you know, say if we want to do if ESPN Plus were to do it next year, right? Like, hey, we have the rights to the 2023 or the 2024 Dream Bowl, right? Yeah, it gives you time to kind of follow the players and prepare, and follow the Ivy League too. I mean, that would be a great, in my opinion, because they already have the Ivy League football rights. So why,
Hmm.
why why not throw that in there? It's essentially an Ivy League All Star game going up against the All Stars of another country. So why not do it?
Yeah. They played it at the Olympic Stadium, and unfortunately here, it was not live on TV. It was not. It was
Yeah,
not on one of the over the air channels.
no, it was pretty much just the I got it on YouTube.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was on YouTube. I've looked for it since. I have not seen it. I don't know if it's disappeared or the link to the game, but I know it's on ESPN Plus now. Um,
The this Dream Bowl.
yeah,
Oh, interesting. Okay, I didn't know that.
yeah. I don't know. I looked for it the other day to see if it was on, and yeah, it's gone now. So I'll have to research a little bit and find out where
That's
that link is if it's still on YouTube.
did you? I can send you the link. I actually just watched a little bit of it earlier. Did you watch it through ESPN Plus?
Yeah, yeah. I
What
watched.
was
Actually, I watched it on ESPN Plus. Um, and yeah, yeah. I mean,
what was the production quality like? Do they have play-by-play announcers
it was
and
good.
sideline reporters,
Yeah,
or do they have?
it was good. I had it on mute in the background, so I kind of watched it. So
Okay.
I wasn't listening to the announcers.
Mhm.
But it was Japanese. From what I remember, it was Japanese announcers.
Okay. Yeah, I think for
I
something
had
like
it.
that to kick off here, if they had like English commentators, there even like a
Yeah,
radio call would be good. And something
right.
else I think would also help is you mentioned baseball. Wasn't there a movie with Tom Selleck?
Oh yeah, Mr. Baseball.
Yeah, I feel like something like that would actually do a lot of good to increase the sport over there too. Say if you have, just take any story of a guy who who played football over here and went to the X League. Just sort of like
Oh
a
yeah,
day, a
yeah,
season in the life of them.
yeah.
I think
Fish
that
out
would.
of water story.
Oh, 100%. I think that would definitely increase the appeal. Because people see a movie like that on like Netflix or something. I think they would definitely
Yeah,
be intrigued by that
yeah.
idea.
Well, and I mean, there's BJ Beatty is always the example I give. He came over, played football at Colorado,
Mhm.
and then he came over here and played and made not only made a career over here, but also made a life here too. And he's enjoyed it, and he's turned it into a coaching career. And we always talk about there's just so much potential here, and there's so much potential in a lot of other countries too that I'm just I would say probably in the next 10 years, we're going to see the NFL really start to push the international. I mean, they're talking about having a division over in Europe. I'm still trying to figure out the logistics on that, but there's a way to make that work. If you're going to have a European division, then that European division doesn't play teams from the West Coast. You just, you know, you
Yeah,
factor that in.
yeah, I would much rather see a much more global approach. It's like
Right.
instead of just limited to European teams, maybe even if it's just Japan, and maybe it's too premature to say China or another
Yeah.
Asian country to get involved in. But if they can include them, I think they would do a lot to kind of expose the game and really show what the game is all about.
Yeah. Have you read the book by Keegan Dresso called Gridiron Cup 1982?
No,
It's available on Amazon. It doesn't cost a whole lot, but I interviewed him last
what's
week to
what's it
talk
called?
about it. It's called Gridiron Cup 1982, and it's basically an alternate universe story about it's a great what if story. Um, what if Burt Bell had been successful in convincing in 1948 the London Olympic Committee to have basically a football demonstration, and
Hmm.
from there, and then Joseph Stalin, and I'm not giving away anything, but basically Joseph Stalin decides, hey, we're going to compete with the Americans in football, and from there, history diverges. And in terms of football, gridiron football ultimately becomes the world sport, not
Interesting.
soccer. So, yeah, I interviewed him last week. It's a great book. It is a great book. So if you ever
I
get
gotta
it, and
listen to
it's
that.
on, if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can read it for free.
Was that something that Burt Bell had actually tried to lobby?
That's a good question, and that's something I I want to ask Upton Bell,
Hmm.
because I don't think Upton has read this book. I could see his father doing it, and maybe again, you and I both know Upton.
Hmm.
Um, I am sure Upton and his father had a discussion about how to make the game global. So it's a conversation I want to have with Upton in terms of, obviously he's living history right there, to tell us, if anybody knows, it would be it would be Upton. Yeah, it would be Upton to ask, hey, what was your father thinking way back then?
Yeah.
What would he have thought about where we're at now and the way forward? Because it is a great premise. But the other part of it is, we're talking about football World Cup. They haven't had a football World Cup in years. It's been on hold.
Yeah. What was it? Probably 2004. That was the last time.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm just curious, I don't think football is going to expand a whole lot or get as popular until the NFL decides, okay, this is where we're going to plant the flag now.
Yeah, any football, any gridiron football organization that's going to succeed in the world essentially has to have like some sort of association with the NFL, right?
Right.
Because even the CFL to a certain degree, I think, kind of gets a lot of draw just by guys that I think potentially could go on to that next step per
Yeah.
se, and maybe that's actually kind of diminished a little bit because I don't, for some reason, I haven't really heard a lot about a lot of guys who played in the CFL that went to the NFL as much as I once did. It seemed like for a
Right.
while that was like kind of like an unofficial feeder system, whereas
Yeah.
now I don't know if I really hear that all that much about the CFL being a development step for guys who
Yeah.
are
You
almost
don't
on the.
you you don't hear a whole lot about. I know Nathan Rourke, who played for the BC Lions, my favorite team,
Mhm,
is signed with Jacksonville to be a backup.
mhm,
But it's not like the old days. I mean, you had, back in the old days, you had Joe Theismann saying,
mhm.
he got drafted by the Dolphins, but he was going to have to play behind Bob Greasy, and Don Strock was also there, and so he saw the opportunity, and also too the money was so much different. The money back then, the salaries were very comparable, what you
Yeah.
can make in the CFL versus the NFL. But nowadays, obviously that's completely changed. But yeah, I mean, you don't hear a whole lot about CFL players in the NFL, but they're there. But they're in more in supporting roles. Nathan Rourke right now, just off the top of my head, is the one going into next season that you're probably going to hear the most about. Bo Levi Mitchell was thinking about going south, but at the time I think he was coming off a Grey Cup win up in Calgary, and he
Mhm.
decided to stay north. As it turns out, now he's going to be playing in Hamilton. But the CFL, and CFL has its own issues struggling. When I was up in Canada in November, I was talking to a Capitol policeman. My wife and I were in Ottawa for a couple days, and I mentioned the CFL, and he's like, "Oh, it was very lukewarm. Like, oh yeah, no, I watch NFL, So, but then I met other people. It's like, oh yeah, huge Red Blacks fan. But the
Yeah.
CFL has its own struggles just getting Canadians to watch their game.
Yeah.
Um, and the NFL is so popular up there. So, well, listen,
Well,
we have gone quite a ways here.
yeah, this is a good conversation, man. Touched on a lot of good topics.
Yeah. Anything we're missing in this first episode here? Because I mean, we're kind of going on round and round, and this is the beta episode to try to figure it all out. But I mean, I like being
Why
able to
don't you
sit down here.
why don't you tell the audience where the name comes from?
Football America comes from an NFL Films special basically documenting football being played in America outside the NFL. It's available on YouTube, and that's kind of the inspiration, just to talk about football, kind of like outside the lines, more or less.
Hmm.
We always talking about what's going on between between the lines. But to me, the fascinating part about football is what happens outside the lines, whether it be in pop culture, like what you cover on your podcast, or on the business end. And nobody really talks a whole lot about the business side of it. You've got Tim Hamlin, his great show, Good Seats Still Available, talks about it with old leagues and everything. So, but I like to have these conversations with, my friends when we're not on camera, we're not hitting the record, just talking about where football is and, what we think is going to happen, particularly when it comes to these new leagues popping up, because I know we both have strong opinions. So we'll see. The XFL is going to be starting here this weekend, so I'm sure the next time I record an episode, be a lot more to talk about, especially observations as to what we're seeing on the field with the XFL. So, can you tell everybody where to find your podcast at?
Yeah, definitely. I'm on any platform that you get your podcast, whether it's Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube. And you can also find me on Twitter at Football Odyssey, with it's ODY in the letter C. Also on Instagram, and I can send you the information if you want the links for people to go to. But yeah, I mean, this is really grateful that you had me on. A lot of good topics we explored today.
And I would be amiss if I didn't mention your website, because your website, I mean, your podcast is awesome. I mean, your podcast is one of my favorites. But your website is just as awesome, because the way you've laid out your website gives it that old school 1970s library feel, which is just awesome. And I'm like, oh, this is, I don't know, if anybody who has not been to the website, go to the website. Aaron's got some great stuff, not only with the podcast, but you've also got articles, especially the article that one of the first ones I read was your one on football in Japan.
Yeah, and I later adapted that into the podcast format. Appreciate the love for the website. The primitive look of it is more so because I'm not a good web designer, so I try to keep it as simple to use as possible. But yeah, I've kind of gotten away from the website. I guess since I've started doing podcasting, I don't post as many articles as I once did on the blog, but it's definitely something I want to get back to, at least on a monthly basis. But yeah, definitely. I try to group it by certain topics. The whole reason for doing it was to try to touch on, more esoteric topics in football that maybe don't get a lot of coverage in national media.
Yeah.
So sometimes you'll see, topics about minor league teams. Yeah, I actually pertain to this conversation. I think a year ago, I wrote an article about the history of spring football, going back to, its roots in the early 1970s. I think it was 1971 with the Transatlantic Football League.
Okay.
So if anybody's interested in that, that would be a good starting point if you were interested in that aspect of this conversation.
And have you taken because I haven't looked at your website recently, but have you taken my advice, and like you did a podcast about Weeb Ewbank, and
yeah, that was a YouTube documentary video that I made that I put on the podcast feed too. Yeah.
Did you add the link from archive.org about his book? Because that's one of those books that's out of print, and the only place you can read that book is through archive.org. You can check the book out and read it.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. I'll definitely post a link to that. Yeah. That's a book. Every time I read it, it definitely climbs up the ladder, and I put it in my top 3 football books of all time. I absolutely love that book.
That's one of those books. Whereas when I was moving, because I had to figure out what I was taking with me and what I was not taking with me, and I found that book on archive.org, and I'm like, okay, I got to give the physical one. I gave that one to Randy Snow at the World of Football podcast. But it was heartbreaking having to part with a lot of my football books, because I had some good, the hard copies, just the ones you're like, but there were some that I took with me. The one, Fun While It Lasted, about the World Football League.
Okay.
And
I haven't read that one.
The $1 late. That's but again, it goes back to what I was saying. All these, I'm like, oh my God, archive.org has it. So, and I don't know anybody at archive.org, but if I've got to plug a website for no reason other than for the joy I get just by going there and finding, oh, hey, I remember this book as a kid. oh, I can check it out. Nice.
Yeah.
I'm going to do that. Yeah. So anyway, well, hey, with that,
I just got done flipping through. They call it a game. Bernie Parrish's book,
yes.
sort of like the complement to David Megacy's book, so to speak. It wasn't bad. I also, I think you're a fan of Michael Oriard, right?
Yeah. Yeah. He's got several of his books on there.
Yeah, I love End of Autumn, his first book that he wrote an article about one of his teammates who ended up actually murdering his wife and then killing himself. His name was Jim Tyre, I believe. And he had wrote a book about, sort of like the fall of a football hero.
Oh man.
And people were interested in his story about what it was like to be sort of like a middle of the road. You still good?
Yep, I'm still there. You broke up right there. You're talking about the middle of, and then you stopped right there.
Yeah, like he was a middle of the road player. He had started for the Chiefs for a few years and then departed eventually. But it's definitely one of the most eloquently written books about the game. From childhood and his observations about college and pro.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's always interesting. I mean, his books are great, but just to even hear him talk when they're interviewing him on. If you saw that, I think was he in the documentary Full Color Football? I think they interviewed him for that.
He wasn't in that one. He actually might have been. I got to rewatch that. I got to rewatch that series. I know for a fact he was in the 150 anniversary for college football for ESPN.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of. But I mean, he's got much like, have you ever seen the baseball document, Ken Burns Baseball?
A little bit here and there. I've never watched the full thing from beginning to end. I think it's 9 episodes.
Yeah. Well, they did one on the SEC, but then there was that whole college 150th anniversary, and all those episodes and the SEC 8-part documentary, all reminded me of the Ken Burns Baseball documentary. They were just so well done. So, well, listen, everybody. With all that said, hey, thank you very much for listening. If you've hung around to the end here, I appreciate it. You can find me at CFL America on Twitter, and hey, feel free to reach out to me and give me some constructive criticism, or you can bash me too. It's okay. If you think I'm completely way off base with any of my opinions, I appreciate that feedback too. I don't mind trolls because
be careful what you be careful.
At least I know but at least I know they're listening.
Yeah. Yeah. The bigger the audience, the better, no matter who it is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So everybody, hey, thank you very much for listening to this initial beta episode of Football America, and hope to talk to you very soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.